value of art lies in making people happy, first in practicing the art, and then in possessing its product. This observation might seem needless, and ought to be so, but if we compare it with what is commonly said on these subjects, we must confess that it may often be denied, and more often, perhaps, may not be understood. Happiness is something men ought to pursue, although they seldom do so. They are drawn away from it, at first by foolish impulses, and afterwards by perverse customs. To secure happiness, conduct would have to remain spontaneous, while it learned not to be criminal. But the fanatical attachment of men, now to a fierce liberty, now to a false regimen, keeps them barbarous and wretched. A rational pursuit of happiness, which is one thing with progress, or with the life of reason, would embody that natural piety which leaves to the episodes of life their inherent values: mourning death, celebrating love, sanctifying civic traditions, enjoying and correcting nature's ways. To discriminate happiness is therefore the very soul of art, which expresses experience without distorting it, as those political or metaphysical tyrannies distort it which sanctify unhappiness. A free mind, like a creative imagination, rejoices at the harmonies it can find or make between man and nature, and where it finds none, it solves the conflict so far as it may, and then notes and endures it with a shudder. A morality organized about the human heart is an ingenious and sincere fashion. It may involve every fine art. It would render the world pervasively beautiful, beautiful in its artificial products, and beautiful in its underlying natural terrors. The closer we keep to elementary human needs and to the natural agencies that may satisfy them, the closer we are to beauty. Industry, sport, and science, with the perennial intercourse and passions of men, swarm with incentives to expression, because they are everywhere creating new modes of being and compelling the eye to observe those forms and to recast them ideally. Art is simply an adequate industry. It arises when industry is carried out to the satisfaction of all human demands, even of those incidental sensual demands which we call aesthetic, and which a brutal industry, in its haste, may despise or ignore. Arts responsive in this way to all human nature will be beautiful according to reason, and might remain beautiful long. Poetic beauty touches the world whenever it attains some unfeigned harmony, either with sense or with reason. And the more unfeignedly human happiness was made the test of all institutions and pursuits, the more beautiful they would be, having more numerous points of fusion with the mind, and fusing with it more profoundly. To distinguish and to create beauty would then be no art relegated to a few abstracted spirits playing with casual fancies. It would be a habit inseparable from practical efficiency. All operations, all affairs, would then be viewed in the light of ultimate interest and in their deep relation to human good. The arts would thus recover their Homeric glory, touching human fate as they clearly would. They would borrow something of its grandeur and pathos, and yet the interest that worked in them would be warm, because it would remain unmistakably animal and sincere. The principle that all institutions should subserve happiness runs deeper than any cult for art, and lays the foundation on which the latter might rest safely. If social structure were rational, its free expression would be so too. Many observers, with no particular philosophy to adduce, feel that the arts among us are somehow impotent, and they look for a better inspiration, now to ancient models, now to the raw phenomena of life. A dilettante may, indeed, summon inspiration whence he will, and a virtuoso will never lack some material to keep him busy. But if what is hoped for is a genuine, native, inevitable art, a great revolution would first have to be worked in society. We should have to abandon our vested illusions, our irrational religions and patriotisms and schools of art, and to discover instead our genuine needs, the forms of our possible happiness. To call for such self-examination seems revolutionary only because we start from a sophisticated system, a system resting on traditional fashions and superstitions, by which the will of the living generations is misinterpreted and betrayed. To shake off that system would not subvert order, but rather institute order for the first time. It would be an instauratio magna, a setting things again on their feet. We in Christendom are so accustomed to artificial ideas and to artificial institutions kept up to express them that we hardly conceive how anomalous our situation is, sorely as we may suffer from it. We found academies and museums as we found missions to fan a flame that constantly threatens to die out for lack of natural fuel. Our overt ideals are parasites in the body politic, while the ideals native to the body politic, those involved in our natural structure and situation, are either stifled by that alien incubus, leaving civic life barbarous, or else force their way up unremarked, or are not justly honored as ideals. Industry and science and social amenities, with all the congruous comforts and opportunities of contemporary life, march on their way as if they had nothing to say to the spirit, which remains entangled in a cobweb of dead traditions. An idle pottering of the fancy over obsolete forms, theological, dramatic, or plastic, makes that byplay to the sober business of life which men call their art or their religion. The more functionless and gratuitous this byplay is, the more those who indulge in it think they are idealists. They feel they are champions of what is most precious in the world, as a sentimental lady might fancy herself a lover of flowers when she pressed them in a book instead of planting their seeds in the garden. It is clear that gratuitous and functionless habits cannot bring happiness. They do not constitute a pursuit at once spontaneous and beneficent, such as noble art is an instance of. Those habits may indeed give pleasure, they may bring extreme excitement, as madness notably does, though it is in the highest degree functionless and gratuitous, nor is such byplay without consequences, some of which might conceivably be fortunate. What is functionless is so called for being worthless from some ideal point of view, and not conducing to the particular life considered. But nothing real is disassociated from the universal flux. Everything, madness, and all unmeaning cross currents in being, count in the general process and discharge somewhere, not without effect, the substance they have drawn for a moment into their little vortex. So our vain arts and unnecessary religions are not without real effects, and not without a certain internal vitality. When life is profoundly disorganized, it may well happen that only in detached episodes, only in moments snatched for dreaming in, can men see the blue or catch a glimpse of something like the ideal. In that case, their esteem for their irrelevant visions may well be grounded, and their thin art and far-fetched religion may really constitute what is best in their experience. In a pathetic way, these poor enthusiasms may be justified, but only because the very conception of a rational life lies entirely beyond the horizon. It is no marvel, when art is a brief truancy from rational practice, that the artist himself should be a vagrant, and at best, as it were, an infant prodigy. The wings of genius serve him only for an escapade, enabling him to skirt the perilous edge of madness and of mystical abysses. But such an erratic workman does not deserve the name of artist or master. He has burst convention only to break it, not to create new convention more in harmony with nature. His originality, though it may astonish for a moment, will in the end be despised and will find no thoroughfare. He will meantime be wretched himself, torn from the roots of his being by that cruel, unmeaning inspiration, or, if too rapt to see his own plight, he will be all the more pitied by practical men, who cannot think it a real blessing to be lost in joys that do not strengthen the character and yield nothing for posterity. Art, in its nobler acceptation, is an achievement, not an indulgence. It prepares the world, in some sense, to receive the soul, and the soul to master the world. It disentangles those threads in each that can be woven into the other. That the artist should be eccentric, homeless, dreamful, may almost seem a natural law, but it is nonetheless a scandal. An artist's business is not really to cut fantastical capers or be licensed to play the fool. His business is simply that of every keen soul, to build well when he builds, and to speak well when he speaks, giving the treatment everywhere the greatest possible affinity to the theme and the most delicate adjustment to every faculty it affects. The wonder of an artist's performance grows with the range of his penetration, with the instinctive sympathy that makes him, in his mortal isolation, considerate of other men's fate and a great diviner of their secret, so that his work speaks to them kindly, with a deeper assurance than they could have spoken with to themselves. And the joy of his great sanity, the power of his adequate vision, is not the less intense because he can lend it to others and has borrowed it from a faithful study of the world. If happiness is the ultimate sanction of art, art, in turn, is the best instrument of happiness. In art, more directly than in other activities, man's self-expression is cumulative and finds an immediate reward. For it alters the material conditions of sentience, so that sentience becomes at once more delightful and more significant. In industry, man is still servile, preparing the materials he is to use in action. In action itself, though he is free, he exerts his influence on a living and treacherous medium, and sees the issue at each moment drift farther and farther from his intent. In science, he is an observer, preparing himself for action in another way, by studying its results and conditions. But in art, he is at once competent and free. He is creative. He is not troubled by his materials, because he has assimilated them and may take them for granted. Nor is he concerned with the chance complexion of affairs in the actual world, because he is making the world over, not merely considering how it grew or how it will consent to grow in the future. Nothing, accordingly, could be more delightful than genuine art, nor more free from remorse and the sting of vanity. Art springs so completely from the heart of man that it makes everything speak to him in his own language. It reaches, nevertheless, so truly to the heart of nature that it cooperates with her, becomes a parcel of her creative material energy, and builds up by instinctive hand. If the various formative impulses afoot in the world never opposed stress to stress, and made no havoc with one another, nature might be called an unconscious artist. In fact, just where such a formative impulse finds support in the environment of consciousness supervenes, If that consciousness is adequate enough to be prophetic, and art arises. Thus the emergence of arts out of instincts is the token, an exact measure of nature's success and of moral happiness.